Heisman Trophy voter, Brent Beaird, who just here in the last day or so, I guess, Brent, finalized those selections. I'm guessing at the top it may not have been all that difficult, but we do have 4 finalists, Brent, and I would be interested to know how that sort of shook out for you in relation to the 4 guys we now know are going to be in New York City this weekend.
Well, the deadline is 5 o'clock on Monday to get everyone's vote in, and how that has worked over the last few years. As you can imagine, Trav, it's all electronic now through email, unless there's some circumstances, and I'm sure probably some people have them, that they can't do that. So, I was a bit surprised. I'll be honest with you. I thought they would have 3, but they instead they've got 4 guys at this point, which I think is fair. There's certainly some talk among the Heisman members in the media that they ought to go to 5, frankly, and just to not necessarily or unnecessarily extend it, but just to give the sport a little bit more publicity. The Heisman, we actually have to sign or click on a disclaimer that all the voters that they will not reveal their vote until it's over. Now, here's my opinion on that. I think, I'll be honest with you, Trav, I think that's a mistake. And you remember this day like I do, that people used to be able to talk about who they voted for during the week. That actually gave the award a little bit more publicity. So I guess I get that to some degree, but to me, having voters talking the whole week about with different people about who they voted for, that would only help the publicity with the award. But unfortunately, that's kind of where we are with it.
That's interesting, and I agree with you. You would think. It's still obviously one of the most prestigious individual honors in all of sports. No one's arguing that. But in terms of the interest leading up to the ceremony, I wouldn't say it is, maybe not even close to what it was 15, 20 years ago, Brent.
No, it's not. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I guess you could look at the ratings for the show to kind of point to that, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trav, do you remember that website Stiff Arm Trophy that they had years ago? Well, that one's no longer in existence anymore, which kind of gave people went to that site during the week leading up to the Heisman Trophy. Now, it is interesting that 3 of the 4 Heisman finalists either played for or used to play for Ohio State. So that's an Ohio State commercial in some ways as much as it is. And one of the neat things I saw on Twitter, and I give Brian Fisher credit for this, was that when Burrow was named a finalist, it was 60 years to the day when Billy Cannon won the trophy. Richard Nixon, who was vice president, gave it to him. So that was one of the more interesting notes I've seen this week so far.
Yeah, and also it's an illustration of how impactful the transfer portal has become. You only have one of the 4 finalists, right? Yeah. That haven't been through the transfer portal. Joe Burrow from Ohio State to LSU, Jalen Hurts from Alabama to Oklahoma, Justin Fields from Georgia to Ohio State. Maybe it should be the transfer portal MVP. We'll start calling the Heisman, because it really speaks to sort of the active nature of movement. And I guess as much as anything, obviously, at the quarterback position, which we're seeing once again this offseason, especially right here in the Southeastern Conference.
Well, and people who follow the award have realized over the years that obviously it's mostly an offensive award, although I've never had any problem in voting for outstanding defensive defensive players. But Trev, you remember the day when it was dominated by running backs? Now it's dominated by quarterbacks. I'll be interested to see over the next few years if that changes somewhat.
Well, and if a guy was deserving of the Heisman Trophy as a strictly defensive player, not Charles Woodson in 97, who played some offense, right. I believe returned punts, just strictly a defensive player. If we were going to have one of those by now, shouldn't it have been Derrick Thomas in 1988?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, when you basically get what, Trav, almost 30 sacks, which some teams don't get 30 sacks in a year, there's absolutely no question about that. He should have got it.
Yeah, and really, it was Derrick Thomas, I would think, that spurred the evolution of the sack as a recognized stat in college football, because during Derrick's career, it wasn't. And so Terrell Suggs, I believe, formerly of Arizona State, still is listed as the single season and perhaps career sacks leader in college football, when we all know just in 1988 alone, Derrick Thomas put up some numbers when it comes to TFLs and sacks that you won't see matched ever in college football. And that was in a time when teams weren't throwing it around every play.
No.
So when you think about Derrick Thomas's sack numbers from 88, which, as you said, approached 30, and the number of opportunities he had to rush the quarterback 30 plus years ago now, it wasn't as frequent, didn't have as many opportunities as guys like Chase Young have these days. So let me ask you this, since we are dealing with a shroud of secrecy when it comes to this Heisman Trophy ballot, can you tell us whether or not your finalists, in no particular order, matched up with the four guys that are going to be in New York City this weekend?
Yeah, well, and we're actually only allowed to vote for 3. So I was intrigued that it came up to 4. My top 2 were there. Number 3 wasn't there, and I was a little bit surprised that he was not there. But yeah, that is it. We are allowed now to do 3. It used to be more than that years ago, frankly. So, but and again, the deadline is Monday at 5:00, as it was yesterday, and. Frankly, I never vote until the last day, because I've always been one to believe that I mean, I know, you pretty much know who you're going to vote for, but to me, it's always worth it to wait to the championship weekend just to see if anything can happen.
So one of your top 3 are not going to be there this weekend. I'm going to guess that player is a running back. Am I correct on that?
Yes, you are correct with that. That's right.
And that is something that is, unfortunately for that position, that's become more the norm, because when you look at running back, really going back to Ron Dane winning it in 99 from the University of Wisconsin, in this century, we've had 3 running backs win the Heisman Trophy. One of those, Reggie Bush, had his 2005 award vacated. So that leaves you with 2 running backs that have won the Heisman Trophy that are recognized, at least, in this century, both of them from the University of Alabama. Brent.
That's right. That's
Mark
right.
Ingram and Derrick Henry.
Yeah, that's amazing when you think about that.
Quarterback award. No doubt about it. So, Brent, as we get ready for bowl season, some things I wanted to touch on with you here. SEC coach, these 9 SEC teams in bowl play coming up. Which of those 9 coaches, other than Ed Orgeron, and I'm talking about more from a job status standpoint than I am anything else. Obviously, Ed Orgeron could use a couple wins. He's trying to win a national championship. But in terms of maybe stabilizing or improving his respective situation at his current place of employment, which SEC coach, in your opinion, most in need of a bowl win this season?
Well, what hit me first, Travis, is Kirby Smart of Georgia. And the reason I say that is, look, Kirby's not about to lose his job necessarily, but Trav, it's the image. And look, I think Kirby, Trav, is at a crossroads right now. I know you get the Mark Richt versus Kirby. They'll compare the records and all of that. Kirby's got more talent, I think, basically than Mark did, and I think Kirby has done a better job overall in bigger games. But I think there's two or three things going on here. One is a year where a lot of people thought that they would be in the playoffs. And by the way, a lot of people may miss this, but Rob Mullen said in the teleconference after everything was settled that they actually had some conversation for number 4 between Georgia and Oklahoma. It was a brief conversation, I think, Trav, but they still had one. But here's the thing with Georgia. Georgia basically was boat race by LSU. Now, they had some unbelievable injuries, but I think where the problem right now is with Georgia is mainly, obviously, they lose Sam Pittman, who's one of their better recruiters, and frankly, one of the better assistants anywhere, but arguably the best offensive line coach in the nation. And look, there's no doubt about it. That hurt Georgia with him gone. Now, there's some. I'm curious what you've heard. I've seen some reports about maybe Matt Luke coming over from Ole Miss and taking that job. But I think the bigger issue here is Trav. I know Nick Saban's going through this and he adjusted well. But Trav, is it fair to say that Kirby right now, in his offensive philosophy and what they do, and I don't say he's got to abandon everything that he believes in, but I think they're at a crossroads as far as what they need to do. Does Jake Fromm come back? Do they get another offensive coordinator? Does he change his philosophy somewhat? And after last year's bowl debacle against Texas, I think they need to play better and show a little more effort and a little more encouragement coming from that offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, the approach in general for Georgia on the offensive side of the ball isn't what we're seeing more and more of, certainly, in college football. And I'm not talking about in terms of 3-4 wide receiver sets, because you see that from Georgia. Sure. But you don't see the RPO game as much. No. You don't see a quarterback that can hurt you, at least threaten you with his legs. Joe Burrow's not Lamar Jackson, but Joe Burrow can definitely do some things athletically that stress a defense. Just look at the in-game situation here in Tuscaloosa, where they were able to empty the backfield and get Alabama in some man-to-man situations and then really hurt that Alabama defense with some quarterback runs. There's not that sort of versatility, I guess is what I'm saying, in Georgia's approach to offensive football. I'll give you a guy that I think, and I want to ask you this too, with Kirby and Georgia, who do you have as your way too early SEC Eastern Division favorite for 2020? Is it still Kirby and Georgia, or do you think the media will side with Dan Mullen and the Florida Gators? Florida's got to replace some people too, right?
Well, yeah, there's no doubt about that. Now I'll say this, and you know how this is misleading. If Georgia ekes out a win in the Sugar Bowl and Florida is able to vaporize Virginia, something like Clemson did, I think you've got an off season where they're going to be looking like the stance from the media is going to be, well, Kirby he's in the Stone Age, and Dan Mullen is this ultra successful modern coach that's throwing it all over the field. Georgia's still got more talent. I don't care what anybody says, but can you see that like I can?
Oh yeah.
For that shift coming?
I've already seen some of it from the UF media down there.
Yes, correct.
10 wins wins and New Year's Six bowls. Well, who has Dan Mullen actually beat, though, throughout the years? Not just at Florida, but at Mississippi State. Really good coach, don't get me wrong. But where's the big game on Dan Mullen's resume at this point? And so I'm with you. I would still go with Georgia at this point heading into 2020, but I don't think there's any question there's going to be a surge in Florida's direction, in Florida's favor going into SEC Media Days next summer. Talking with Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News on a Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier. I'll go with Joe Moorhead. In that category of SEC coach most in need of a bowl win, for the simple fact that Ole Miss inserts Lane Kiffin into its head job, a real needle-moving type hire. Yes. Regardless of what you think about Lane, he has made that program relevant on the national scale.
That's right.
Very quickly, very much talked about here in the last few days. When I look at Joe Moorhead and I look at Mississippi State right now, I just don't see much in the way of juice. And so for the time being anyway, it's going to be Ole Miss. That's going to be the talk of that state. That's going to be a large part of what we talk about in this region and even, again, at the national level. So I think Joe Moorhead needs a win over Louisville up there in Nashville in that Music City Bowl. Hey, Brent, what about at the assistant? Well, actually, I want to ask you as we move on from the head coach hires in the SEC, how would you rank the three SEC head coaching hires that we've seen here in the last few days with Missouri and Ole Miss? And you mentioned Sam Pittman at Arkansas. From best to worst, how do you rank those three?
I think Lane's is one. Listen, I think Lane knows, Travis, if he has 3 or 4 good years at Ole Miss, that he's leapfrogging to a major job after that if he can behave during the time he's there. And I think Lane, to his credit, did a really good job at FAU and his grown-ups. So, or growing up some. So I'll say Lane won.
Pops disagrees with you on that. Pops says that he doesn't trust Lane to be grown up.
Well, he may not be in that grove, Trav. I can appreciate some of that.
He might be groved up, but I don't know if he's groved up.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I think Drinkwitz at Missouri would be 2. I mean, he has had a year of experience. It's limited, obviously, and really did a nice job this past year, which that Missouri job. That was an interesting hire, particularly when they were looking at Jim McElwain and Blake Anderson and Skip Holtz and some of those guys, and obviously Pittman would be 3. Now Pittman is beloved, and I don't use that loosely at Arkansas. I mean, they love him there. The former players do. He made a real impact on them. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a great head coach at this point. So I would say those 3. But, with that said, you could make an argument that by at least a little bit in every situation, they may have been an upgrade.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you consider those 3. At the assistant level, real quick as we let you go here, Brent, Mike Bobo going to South Carolina with Will Muschamp. It was widely thought that if Mike returned to the Southeastern Conference after being relieved of his duties as head coach at Colorado State, that he would reunite with his bestie and Kirby Smart back in Athens, Georgia. It has not played out that way. I'm told that from Mike's perspective, he had already done the Georgia thing. He is maybe too good of friends with Kirby. Didn't want to put perhaps that friendship in jeopardy if things didn't go well. Mike Bobo. And a little bit of pressure on Mike considering Will's status right now, I got to think.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And listen, my answer to that would be the same answer of Chad Morris going to Auburn. It would be a situation where will the head coach stay out of the way long enough to let the offensive coordinator do what he needs to do? And listen, you and I both know that Will continues to be an issue. He won't quit meddling Trav in that offensive situation. And frankly, I don't care who he hires, and I think Bobo will do a good job, and I'm glad to see him back in the conference. Trav, will South Carolina ever get any better until Will leaves it alone?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. And if he won't let someone he respects and knows as well as he knows Mike Bobo, then I don't know if that's ever going to happen for Will Muschamp. Well, Brent, as always, great stuff here on Southern Fried Sports. We always appreciate the time. Brent Beaird of College Sports Today and First Coast News. Thanks, Brent.
My pleasure, pal. Take care.